She smiled like she was living the happiest day of her life. And maybe, in her mind, she was. But it had nothing to do with the diploma. The auditorium pulsed with applause and camera flashes. And there she stood, Dr. Madison Keller. My wife. My investment. My mistake. 8 years. That's how long I funded her dream of becoming a surgeon. When she studied late into the night, I made her dinner. When exams crushed her, I hired tutors. She never touched a student loan because I covered it all. Tuition, textbooks, rent back when we were just dating. Even the down payment on her Tesla. That night, she wore her white coat and the same perfume from our first date. I noticed. But I noticed something else too. A man in the crowd. Broad shoulders. Razor-sharp jaw. Clapping harder than her family. Standing there alone with a smug grin. Like he already owned a part of her I no longer did. When she stepped off the stage, her eyes didn't search for me. They locked on him. And in that instant, the ground beneath my life began to crack. But truth is, the rot had taken root long before. I just hadn't dared to look. At the after-party, she buzzed with energy. Professors, friends, cameras swirled around her. I stood beside her parents, quietly watching as she floated through the room. Madison always made me feel like a supporting character, never the star. I was the guy behind the camera. The chauffeur. The invisible billionaire husband. Yes, billionaire. 2 months before her graduation, my startup, Virion, got an acquisition offer. $660 million. I told no one. Not even her. Something deep down whispered, wait. Call it instinct. Call it survival. Because even surrounded by champagne and fairy lights, sitting beside me under the stars, she never once asked how my company was doing. Not during dinner. Not during the toast. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, soon, I'll finally be free to build my life the way I've always dreamed. That was when I knew she wasn't talking about her career. I didn't flinch, just smiled, kissed her forehead, told her how proud I was. That night, while she slept with her back turned to me, like she had for months, I slipped into my office and called my lawyer. The divorce papers she was secretly drafting? I'd already seen them. Found them by accident weeks earlier when I borrowed her laptop. A folder named Freedom. Inside, her statement of irreconcilable differences. A spreadsheet breaking down what she'd take. Her dream life post-separation. A checklist. File after graduation. Highlighted in pink. She never knew I saw it. Never knew I'd read her messages to Liam, the smug bastard from the ceremony. Can't wait to be yours fully, she wrote. He's too focused on his little company to even notice. She had no idea that little company had just rewritten my entire future. So I played along. Sent flowers when she got her residency letter. Took her out to celebrate. Praised her like the proud husband she wanted on display. Meanwhile, I moved every asset, every patent, every cent into a trust. Under my name. Alone. A week later, on a gray, rain-slick Tuesday, she filed. And that's when the panic began. The email came first. Her lawyer, someone I'd never heard of, announcing Madison Keller was filing for divorce on grounds of emotional neglect and irreconcilable differences. She didn't even face me. Just a cold signature on a PDF. I sat at the kitchen island, sipping black coffee. No rage. No grief. Just confirmation. She thought she was 2 moves ahead, never realizing the game had already ended. That night, she came home late. Makeup perfect. Lingerie under her coat. I could tell. But not for me. Hadn't been for a while. She strolled into the kitchen like nothing had changed. Like the last 8 years were a tab I'd never be repaid for. I need to talk to you, she said, slipping her phone into her purse. It's about us. I nodded. Let me guess, you're not happy. She blinked, thrown off. I just feel like we've grown apart, she said, voice dripping with rehearsed concern. You've changed. You don't support me emotionally anymore. You've been distant, she said. Distant? I echoed, voice low. Did I seem distant when I paid your tuition? When I sold my car so you wouldn't have to drown in student loans? When I skipped every vacation for 4 years so you could study without stress? She froze. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For once, she had no clever reply. She fumbled, trying to recover. This isn't about money, Jason. It's about my independence. I need to explore who I really am. I leaned in, calm as still water. And does Liam help you with that? Exploration? The color drained from her face. Her confidence shattered in a heartbeat, and I watched it crumble, beautiful in a bitter, poetic way. Who? She stammered. You really think I don't know? I laughed, not kindly. You think I'm some oblivious fool who doesn't notice when his wife lies about night shifts but comes home reeking of someone else's cologne? Her face twisted, not with guilt, with rage. Like a kid caught red-handed and angry they didn't get away with it. You went through my stuff? No. You left it open, just like everything else you're careless about. And then came the clause. I wasted the best years of my life trying to be your perfect wife, she snapped. You think money makes you untouchable? You're boring, Jason. You've always been boring. I want passion. I want someone who makes me feel alive. I didn't flinch. Just watched her unravel. You can keep your money, she hissed. I don't care. I have my degree now. I have options. I'm not scared to be alone. I almost pitted her. Because 2 days later, reality bulldozed her ego. Her attorney emailed mine, only to discover she was entitled to nothing. Not a dime. The trust was ironclad. Every asset she named in her divorce papers, already gone. The mansion, technically owned by a foundation in my mother's name. The stock she thought she'd liquidate, moved and hidden in plain sight. That night, my phone buzzed 23 times. The same phone she used to ignore when I'd text during her shifts, now lit up nonstop. I never picked up. Her last voicemail was a whisper. Jason, please. We need to talk. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I made a mistake. We can fix this. Just call me back, okay? Please. But I was done being the fool. I let her sit in the silence she once used like a blade. My decision was made. And it was only the beginning. I saw her 2 weeks later at a cafe. She hadn't spotted me yet. Her back was to the window. No makeup. Hair tied in a tired bun. She looked smaller now. Dimmer. Across from her sat Liam, talking fast, gesturing like a man trying too hard. She just stared into her coffee like it held answers. I walked past the glass, slow and purposeful. She looked up. Our eyes met. I didn't stop. Didn't nod. Just kept walking. And in that flicker, her parted lips, the tension in her shoulders, I found closure. That split second of panic in her gaze, I burned it into memory. That was mine. I gave this woman 8 years. In return, she gave me betrayal dressed as freedom. She thought becoming a doctor meant she could sever the leash. She never realized I wasn't the leash. I was the spine holding her life upright. That night, her sister Rachel called. We'd always been polite, never close. Jason, she's not doing well, she murmured. I'm aware. She says you ruined her. That you destroyed her reputation. I let out a quiet laugh. Funny. I was thinking the same about her. I don't know all the details, Rachel continued, but she's talking about leaving the country. She thinks people are laughing at her. Maybe they are. Are you really not going to talk to her? She made her choices. Now she can live with them. There was silence. Then Rachel whispered, she was jealous of you, you know. All those years, she felt like the underdog in your marriage. Like she had to prove herself. By sleeping with another man? I'm not saying she was right, Rachel said softly. Just that, she's broken now. She broke herself, I replied. I just stopped catching the pieces. I hung up. That weekend, I flew to Monaco. Byrian's new board was throwing a celebration for our acquisition. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man dragging a ghost behind him. I laughed. I toasted. I slept soundly. No lies waiting for me in the morning. No betrayal wrapped in silence. A month later, my lawyer forwarded a letter. 3 pages. Typed. Madison's desperate final act. Her letter was everything I expected. 3 pages of rambling apologies, half-baked justifications, and pleas for forgiveness laced with subtle blame. She painted herself as a woman who lost her way, who let ambition eclipse love. I never wrote back. I don't believe in ghosts, but I know what it's like to live with one. And I wasn't about to let her haunt me again. She thought she could trade up. Thought that a white coat and medical jargon gave her the right to look down on the man who funded her rise. What she never grasped was simple. Don't bite the hand that built your throne. And if you do, don't be shocked when the kingdom burns quietly beneath you. 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. 3 months since she walked into court wearing her finest outfit, still trying to play the graceful, wronged woman. And 3 months since she walked out pale, crumbling, humiliated. Her dream of leaving me right after graduation with half my empire? Erased. I watched her fall apart when the judge calmly explained the assets were untouchable, legally out of reach. She didn't look at me as she left. just clutched her handbag like it was the last piece of her control. I didn't follow, didn't speak, just walked through the opposite door into a new life. One where I wasn't bankrolling someone else's dream while they schemed against me in the shadows. At first, the quiet felt strange. Not lonely, just still. There's a difference. When someone spends years eroding your self-worth, you start believing you're the one at fault. You overlook the cold silences, the vanishing acts, the locked phone, the way your name disappears from her lips around certain friends. You tell yourself it's stress. Just work. Just life. It wasn't life. It was betrayal with a white smile and a prestigious degree. I spent that summer in real silence. Not the bitter kind she used to punish me, but the kind that heals. Mornings without tension. Evenings without the hollow love you at bedtime. No more coming home to lies dressed as excuses. No more dinners with her scrolling through her phone while I tried to fill the void. I had my company, my people, my peace. And most importantly, I had my dignity. She, on the other hand, had burned bridges she didn't even know she was crossing. Mutual acquaintances started talking. How trust at the hospital was fading. How Liam disappeared the moment the lawsuit buzz went public. How she moved back in with her parents. How she broke down crying during shifts. I waited for the guilt, for the satisfaction. Neither came, because the woman I married no longer existed. She'd been replaced by someone who saw me as a stepping stone. A wallet with a ring. She truly believed she could plan her divorce like a chess match, walk away with the crown, the sympathy, the money. She miscalculated one thing. I don't bluff. I spent a decade building a future for us. But the moment I saw that folder labeled freedom, I realized she'd spent just as long crafting her exit. So I built mine, quieter, sharper, more precise. No outbursts. No confrontation. Just the final move she never saw coming. And when the house of cards fell, I didn't lift a finger. She wanted freedom. I gave her silence. 6 months after the divorce, she came to my office. No warning. I was reviewing acquisitions when my assistant buzzed in. Jason, there's a woman here. Says her name is Madison Keller. Should I tell her you're in a meeting? I stared at the skyline. Clear, vast, untouchable. Send her in. She walked slower than I remembered. No confident sway. Eyes dark, shoulders heavy. No ring, of course, but shame clung to her like concealer. I didn't offer her a seat. I'm not here to fight, she said quietly. I need to talk to you. I gave her nothing. No nod. No words. Just silence. She folded her arms, trying to shield herself from a chill that didn't exist. I know I handled things badly. I know I hurt you. And I don't expect forgiveness. Her voice cracked, just enough to feel real. I thought I was winning. I thought this next chapter would feel powerful, independent. But everything I wanted turned to smoke. Still, I said nothing. You don't even care, do you? She asked, a bitter smile creeping in. You don't hate me. You don't miss me. You just moved on. I finally looked at her. Madison, I said, voice measured, steady. I didn't move on. I moved up. There's a difference. It hit her like a slap. You were supposed to be my partner, I continued. But you treated me like a backup plan. A safety net. Like I was the weight holding you down. You gambled our marriage for a fantasy, and now you're shocked that fantasy doesn't pay the bills. Her eyes filled, but I didn't flinch. I'd seen those tears before, always after the mask slipped. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, you're sorry you lost, I said, firm. That's not the same. She stepped closer. Please, just have dinner with me. One night. One conversation. I want to show you I've changed. I chuckled, cold, final. You didn't come here for closure. You came because the world stopped giving you what I used to hand over without question. She looked down. I walked to the door and opened it. This office isn't your redemption arc, Madison. It's the result of the life I built while you were busy plotting an exit. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with people who respect me. She left without another word. And when the door clicked shut, I felt it. Peace. Not silence. Not emptiness. The kind of peace you earn. The kind that settles into your bones after you've walked through fire, stared down betrayal in heels and lipstick, and come out harder, cleaner. She didn't break me. She freed me. A year passed. Her voice faded from memory. So did the tension, the cold bed, the constant feeling that I wasn't enough for someone who only wanted what I could provide. Now, I woke to sunlight pouring through a villa on the Italian coast. I shared meals with people who built things, empires, ideas, futures. I dated without suspicion, without walking on eggshells. Still, her name returned. Quiet at first. Headlines. Whispers. A malpractice investigation. Misdiagnosed patient. Questions about her judgment. No formal charges, yet. But reputations bleed before verdicts. Of course it made sense. Build a life on lies. And eventually the cracks reached the foundation. One morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then the voicemail came. Jason, it's me. I know you don't owe me anything. I don't even deserve your time. But I don't know who else to call. I'm not okay. I don't have anyone left. I think about everything. Every day. About you. About how I destroyed the only person who ever believed in me. Please, just call me back. Just once. I sat there, watching the waves roll in. Then I deleted the message. There was nothing left to say. She chose her path, brick by selfish brick. I was just the casualty she thought would stay buried. Instead, I became the monument. And her? A cautionary tale whispered behind locker doors and scrub rooms. Later that day, my assistant walked in with quarterly reports. She paused. You okay? Yeah, I said, glancing at the skyline. I am. And I meant it. There's something powerful about rising from ashes someone else lit beneath you. You learn the art of quiet victories. You learn that revenge doesn't need fire. It can look like calm. Like silence. Like success. She thought she broke me. All she did was cut the chains I hadn't realized were choking me. 2 years later, her name trended again. Not for a fellowship. Not for a breakthrough. But for disgrace. Surgeon faces license suspension amid allegations of fraud and misconduct. The article was sterile. Cold. Just like her. Falsified records. Dubious prescriptions. Billed procedures that never happened. At the bottom, one quote from the hospital. She always tried to climb too fast. Thought charm could replace integrity. I didn't gloat. Didn't laugh. Didn't forward it to anyone. I saved it. Filed it away. She did exactly what I knew she would. Self-destruct. Not because of me. I never had to lift a hand. Her ego lit the fuse. And her lies did the rest. The same ego that led her to believe she could outsmart me, outplay the world, and still be adored, was the same one that finally brought her down. I heard through someone in legal that she tried to sue the hospital. Claimed discrimination. Retaliation. All the usual cards. None of them landed. This time, the system didn't protect her. No one did. After that, she went quiet. No social media posts. No career updates. No ring, of course. And Liam? He vanished the moment the investigation gained traction. Turns out, her real man didn't have much staying power when life got difficult. As for me, by then, I was living in Barcelona. A coastal villa. Mornings started with espresso and strategy calls. Evenings ended in silence that soothed, not suffocated. Real peace, not the kind I used to lie to myself about. Then one evening, an envelope showed up. No return name, just a handwritten label. Inside, a letter and a photo. The letter was short. Her handwriting, still sharp, still controlled. I was wrong. About everything. I don't want your forgiveness. I just want you to know I finally understand what I lost. You were never the fool, Jason. I was. And I'll carry that until my last breath. The photo was of us, years ago, at a fundraiser. She was laughing into my shoulder. I was looking at her like she was my whole world. I stared at it for a long time. Then I struck a match. Watched the flame take it slowly. Edges curling, past fading into ash. That chapter didn't end with justice. It didn't end with apology. It ended because I stopped waiting for either. Not every story ends in revenge. Or redemption. Some stories just end, with freedom. And mine had finally begun. She was a storm I once stood in, convinced if I just held on tight enough, I'd make it to sunlight. But storms don't love you. They don't care who you are. They break. They tear. And if you survive, it's not thanks to them. It's in spite of them. I never wrote back. Not because I didn't think she meant it, but because I didn't need it anymore. Closure doesn't come from the one who broke you. It comes when their shadow no longer touches your light. The house we once shared? Sold. Her name? Wiped from everything. My name? On the cover of a memoir now. A bestseller about startups, risk, and how the worst betrayal I ever faced became the best decision I never saw coming. It hit #1 on release day. The dedication was a single sentence, to the lie that set me free. I still get messages from strangers, men who saw fragments of their own story in mine. They ask me the same thing every time. How do you survive it? Here's what I tell them. You don't survive betrayal by clinging to what broke you. You survive by building something so strong in the rubble that they'll spend the rest of their life realizing they let go of gold. You don't need revenge. You don't need her regret. You just need to rise. That's what I did. And now, when people ask me about Madison Keller, I just smile and say, she wasn't a loss. She was a lesson.